Hey there, welcome back. Today we are going to be talking about a topic that is near and dear to me because it is something that I have personally experienced and held me back a lot in life, and that is sexual shame. I'm going to be going over some of the common signs of sexual shame that are usually unconscious to us, and I'm also going to be sharing a lot of personal stories, so thank you for being here during my vulnerability. Because vulnerability is the antidote to shame. If you would have told me even 1 year ago that I would be making a podcast on this, I would have shut down in fear. No freaking way, but here I am, and I'm excited to do this episode, even if it just helps one person feel less alone in their shame. Now, first, I want to talk about sexual shame for what it really is, and it is the disconnect from our life force, from our creative force, from our God energy. It is a belief that what we desire, what we enjoy, or what brings us pleasure is inherently bad. And this ripples to all other areas of your life. Our sexual space is when we can be the most vulnerable, is where we can be the most authentic, and is where we can be the most seen. And that can be very scary. Sexual shame is very common for tons of reasons. Mostly social conditioning, some of the structures that we have lived in under patriarchy, churches, schools, conservative society in general. This is a piece of us that has been controlled, manipulated, coerced in so many ways in order to keep us separate from ourselves so that we are easier to control. So I want you to start off with that understanding is that a lot of the propaganda that we have gotten from our society, our governments, etc., around what it means to be sexual, the shame around it being dirty or wrong or sinful. This was by design. And this shame can actually create large shadow content in our unconscious mind and create a very sharp division in our soul. I find particularly for people that are kinky or queer, there is a lot of internalized shame just because of the society most of us grew up in. First, I want to talk about my queer journey and the way that this manifested for me and how shame played a role in how I expressed myself and even how I came out. So the first crush that I had was on a friend of mine. I was maybe 14 years old, and I remember feeling so taunted by this. I knew that I loved her. I knew that feeling that I got when we were next to each other. I knew she felt it too. But at the time, it was the 90s, being gay wasn't really accepted. Even she would outwardly make fun of lesbians, talked about how she hated lesbians. You know, in hindsight, there was probably something going on there, but I was terrified that if she ever caught wind that I liked her more than a friend, I would lose her. And externally, I was also joining in on this rhetoric of saying really awful things, homophobic things about other people that were gay or lesbian because internally I had my own fears around my own sexuality. It's really sad. I actually found an old journal that I wrote in junior high or high school that said, I really like this person more than a friend, but I swear I'm not a dyke. And I wrote over it and made it into symbols so that nobody would know what it really said. But even years later, I looked at it, I knew exactly what it said. And I was like, you were so ashamed of what you wrote in your journal that you made a whole fucking hieroglyphics around what you said so that no one would know. And then it manifested into when I was of drinking age that I would hook up with my girlfriends, but then feel weird about it, convince myself that I wasn't gay, convince myself that I wasn't bi, and that was just because I was drunk. Then I was in my early 20s and I was dating a man, and I had a friend group at the time that were all gay women, and my boyfriend was very jealous over this, had lots to say about it. Intuitively, he knew I had an inclination towards women and that perhaps our relationship was at risk. Of course, I thought this was crazy at the time. I probably gaslit him. I probably called him homophobic. But really, The first thing that I did after we broke up was start dating women. And I am not proud of this, but during that stint where I finally accepted that I liked women, I went out there, I dated, and I was so incredibly toxic. I would have these one night stands, or I would have these love affairs that would last for, 2 or 3 months, and everything would be great. And then I would shut down, avoid, withdraw. I was that avoidant ex. And everything was going great with me. And then I would just shut down. And this was because I feared being seen so much. Now I can look back and see that's what was going on. But at the time, I just really had a reason on why it wasn't going to work out. I ended up coming out to my parents only because something kind of traumatic happened. It was like I was making out with some girl I was on a date with at the bar where my ex-boyfriend was, and all this drama ensued, and he was like, I knew it, and it was this mess. And I was so upset, and I didn't know who else to call, so of course I called my mom. And I was so scared to tell her, and she took it fine. She was fine with it. But I had all these memories, I had all these beliefs of just implied conversations, making fun of gay people. We didn't have any gay people in my family. The 90s, gay people were the butt of a lot of jokes. We used to say when we didn't like something or something was stupid that it was so gay, I still sometimes say it. I slip up. It's like still in my it's still in my psyche. It's still in my consciousness. So that's part of my conditioning, that I always thought like this would other me in a way that would make me unlovable, or perhaps wrong, sinful, shameful, you name it. There was a lot coming up there. I am also naturally kinky, okay? And I didn't accept that about myself until 2019, when I got into online sex work and had a lot of fun meeting people in the kink and BDSM community. And then I was like, oh, so a lot of these people are pretty normal and cool and not scary or weird like I thought I was. But up until that time, until I took the step to actually put myself out there and engage with this community, I was still having kinky sex, but with partners that I either had to like kind of coerce into doing stuff with me that they were like, huh? Which in hindsight, not cool. I consumed a lot more porn, and in like a compulsive kind of way, like too much. I would also engage in kind of like unsafe kinky practices because things would always get initiated when I was drunk, or perhaps I'd be unwilling to communicate what I wanted. I'm going to use this example. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm saying this on a podcast. Okay. There was this guy that I was dating, and we were drunk and we were messing around, and things were getting real feisty. Things were getting really rough. And I was like, you should punch me in the face. I don't know. At this point in time, I was also very depressed. So I was into like some extreme submission kind of stuff. Okay. And that's the thing too. You start to learn that your unconscious mind sometimes will reflect in your sexual psyche, but whatever. I digress. That was my situation at the time. And I was like, yeah, like, let's try it. And he's like, no, like, let's not. And I think I badgered him into finally doing it. And, I was like, oh, that didn't hurt because I was drunk. Like, try it one more time. And he did. And it did hurt. And the next morning I woke up with a black eye, and it was horrible. He felt fucking horrible. I felt bad. I kind of laughed it off, but really at the end of the day, I was like, I'm never doing anything like that again. What was that? What is wrong with me? Why would I ask someone to do that to me? I probably need help. And it created this shame spiral when really at the time I craved probably experimenting with some submission, but I went straight into punch me in the face while we're drunk versus experimenting, taking it slow, playing with different ideas. It was like it got so suppressed that it came out in this very chaotic, not safe way that made everyone feel kind of bad afterwards. I have had so many fears around my search history, incognito tabs all day. I remember feeling like this part of me that was kinky or interested in this stuff, it must be because there was something wrong with me, because I had trauma, because there was something going on. And really, at the end of the day, now that I've done a lot of my inner work, I've done my shadow work, and I have really brought to light a lot in my sexual psyche, I can see that the problem is that I didn't accept that I had these desires. So they were coming out in very chaotic and very compulsive ways that did not make me feel good. In the same vein, it's like someone that binge eats. It's like you're oppressing, you're oppressing, you're oppressing, you're denying, you're denying, you're denying. So then you're going to eat 12 fucking cupcakes. That's what was going on in my sexual psyche for a long period of time, just because I couldn't admit what I liked. Anyways, now I am in a space in my life where I have such a ownership of what I like, and it does not come out in chaotic ways. I can have fun with it. I can obviously talk about it with you guys now on a podcast and not be so freaked out about it. What I'll say is I now have balance in this area of my life, whereas before I did not, because I was acting out my desires unconsciously. So yeah, I have a unique way of looking at this because I am a Jungian coach, because I help people do shadow work, and because this was a major hurdle for me in my self-development journey that took a lot of inner work and overcoming a lot of shame and darkness to get to the place on the other side where I feel light. So let's talk about it. I'm going to go through a few ways that sexual shame might show up in your life. Again, shame in itself is sometimes unconscious to us because it is shameful to even feel shame. So this is the reason why we generally have a shadow. A lot of stuff we can't even admit that we have shame around. This was definitely the case for me. I always was like, oh, I'm shameless. I have no shame. But literally my whole life was directed by shame and I was just very unconscious of it. So I'm going to go through some things today that will indicate to you if you have perhaps some unconscious shame at play in your sex life. One of the most obvious is the harsh inner critic. So this is the voice, and sometimes we don't observe it. Sometimes we identify with it too much, but it's the voice that tells you you're disgusting, nobody likes you, your desires are weird, your sexual performance sucks. All of that inner critic is a shame critic. Another one is the need for validation or approval when you're having sex, like needing to know that you're very good at sex can be a sign that you have sexual shame. I know for me, and probably for a lot of women out there, a lot of our value is placed on this, our performance. Are we good? Do we live up to the standards of porn? And also men have this of like, am I lasting long enough? Am I pleasing her? How many orgasms can I give her? This kind of stuff. But when we're really focused on the other's approval and our sexual conquest in this way, we are doing it from a place of ego and doing it from a place of lack of confidence and shame. Another one, aside from the inner critic, there's also the outer critic. And this is judging what somebody else enjoys as wrong, gross, weird. This can look like being on a high horse, thinking you're better than other people, having a moral high ground. It can look like homophobia. And the thing is, a lot of times this outer critic that's in our head can be really mean, really awful, and sometimes we won't even want to admit to ourselves that we're thinking these thoughts, but check yourself. When you catch yourself judging, this is really in any part of life, when you catch yourself judging someone else, usually when there's judgment, there's jealousy, but it also keeps you very small, because if you're busy judging everybody else and what they're doing, it's your ego's way of making sure that you never grow and change, because then when you want to grow and change and do something different, you walk through the world thinking everybody is criticizing you just like you criticize them. It creates this energy where it keeps you very small. So watch yourself on that. Any kind of external critic judgments can be a sign of internalized shame. Also, and I have a lot of people that probably like my content that will fall into this category, but it's over intellectualizing your sexuality too, okay? Because sometimes we do just like something because we like it. It had nothing to do with our trauma or what happened or this or that. Like sometimes we just enjoy something and we need to be embodied about it and not overthink it too much or pick it apart to death. Sometimes you don't need to know how the sausage is made, so to speak, and you can just enjoy something. Now, there's some behavioral or relational things that also show up as signs of shame. One being just like the avoidance of sexual topics, not really wanting to have the conversation. You see this a lot with parents and their kids. You can really tell a lot about a parent's shame profile based on how they talk about sex with their kids, but also how people talk about sex with each other. Is it open and free, or is it a little shy, a little embarrassed, a little like, I don't know, how do I say this? And it is a sign of some internalized sexualized shame, but it's also okay. Like, understand that, again, we were kind of all raised in this culture where we weren't really supposed to talk about it. Not a lot of people actually have the tools to communicate this stuff. But again, it is a sign that there might be some work to do around internalized shame if you feel very uncomfortable talking about sexuality with your friends and especially your partner, because this is the person you're going to want to over communicate with when it comes down to your sexual needs, desires, and requirements. Also, acting like you enjoy something when you don't enjoy something, faking an orgasm, living a sexual double life, meaning that you're having maybe really vanilla sex, but then when you're by yourself, all you're jerking off to is kinky porn, or you are in the closet, literally, you're a queer person in a straight relationship, going out cruising, hookups, anonymous hookups. This kind of double life sexuality is a sign that you are living with the sexual shame, because what you are showing to the world and what your persona is putting out there, it is radically different than your sexual life. This creates a divergence. That divergence in itself is shame. Another one might be minimizing your own sexual needs, just kind of going with what your partner wants and not really asserting yourself in the bedroom can also be a sign. When we fall into perfectionism in the bedroom, it kind of goes back to like, oh, I want to be the best. But I think especially with women too, it's like the how do we look? Do we look okay? Am I hot enough? How is my position? How do I look in this from this angle? Versus actually enjoying the experience is a sign that it's that the hyper awareness of your body and wanting to make sure that you look perfect is definitely a sign as well. Another big one is fear of rejection. Fear of sexual rejection is a big one. And this can happen because of actual experiences we have in our lives where maybe we did ask for something that we wanted and we're shut down, or we did share a fantasy and get vulnerable with someone and they got the ick. I mean, this really will stick with you. It's very vulnerable to reach out and ask for intimacy and then be shut down. I always say make sure your sexual partners, that they have these qualities of like curiosity over judgment. They're really enthusiastic about your boundaries. As Dan Savage says, if you listen to Dan Savage, good, giving, and game, this is the vibe that you want with your sexual partners. If you feel like you can't talk to them, you can't trust them, they push boundaries, they don't ask what you like, this is a sign that this partner probably isn't safe. Another sign could be just like fear that lack of sex or lack of sexual performance like risks your relationship and not feeling stable in the relationship unless you sexually perform. Another way to tell if there is some buried sexual shame is if you find yourself using it in coping or avoidance patterns as a way to numb deeper emotional pain, kind of like what I talked earlier about. It could be like compulsive use of pornography, or that the sexual behavior becomes explosive or self-destructive. These types of things, when they're happening, is your unconscious mind going red alert, red alert, red alert. This is like big shame territory. There's such a lack of coherence between your true self and what you're putting out in the world. And these kinds of self-sabotage, explosive, just destructive kind of events, it's a big sign that, hey, something's got to give. You got to do some shadow work. Especially if you're already in a relationship. I mean, this stuff can lead to cheating. It can lead to really risky behavior. This isn't something that you want to continue to go on, because I know from my own experience, your partner will start to intuit it, right? Like I mentioned earlier, they'll start to figure out something's off. You might even put your partner at risk. You're constantly living with this like low-level fear of paranoia that you're going to be exposed for who you really are or what you really like. It's not fun, guys. So the problem with this is that if no one can really see you, no one can really love you, there's going to be this unconscious sense that like who you really are isn't worthy of being seen, because sexual shame, that is the main root. It's feeling not worthy of being seen. It's fearing being seen, okay? And when you fear being seen and you hide so much of your true self, and you're living as a persona that does not align with that, it creates so many emotional issues, anxiety, depression, a trail of fucked up relationships. And until you work on this part of you, it will continue to get worse and worse. And I'm not trying to fearmonger. This is just real, because your sexual life is just so important to how you receive. It's how you receive pleasure. If you feel like the way you receive pleasure is bad or wrong, it relates to how you receive money, how you create things, how you assert yourself in the world, your confidence. It's the one part of your self-development journey that you cannot skip over. I'm going to add this too. If you've had any sexual trauma, there are other layers here, and even more of a reason for you to do this work, because when we have a sexual assault or violation on our body, there's also a nervous system component as well that needs to be addressed through things like nervous system regulation techniques. There's so many out there. There's tapping, there's cryotherapy, there's yoga, Kundalini yoga is great, sauna, acupuncture. But if you have had a body violation, there's also this other aspect of getting back into your body as well, while you're also doing the shadow work and the work on shame. And the truth is, nobody is free of sexual shame completely because of the culture we were birthed into. So I'm not saying you can't transmute it, you can't transcend it, you can't move forward from it, but just know that thing that you're ashamed of is actually the portal to your authenticity. And the sooner you get to a place where you can accept it, the more you're able to move forward in life smoothly, with more joy, more abundance, more fulfillment, more purpose, literally everything. When you're not connected to this part, it's super easy to isolate. It's super easy to just kind of split off your psyche. I'm telling you, getting a handle on the rails of your sexual psyche so it doesn't unconsciously drive your life is so important to your personal growth. So how do you do that? Well, this is what I help people with in my practice. I also have a free guide I'll put in the show notes that kind of goes over what we talked about today. What are the signs of sexual shame? But it also has some journal prompts in there to get to the root of where some of your sexual shame has originated from. I also created a mini program. It includes a live course. You can also catch the replay. There's a bonus guided visualization that brings you in through your unconscious mind and helps pull a root of your sexual shame. And then there's an integration process that happens as part of the visualization. Also, as a bonus, there is a one-on-one sexual shadow work session with me where you can talk to me directly about what's going on. And then we'll do a little shadow work session around it. The live portion of it is on October 10th at 9 a.m. Pacific. And once you purchase, you can book your session with me right away. You don't have to wait for the course. Early bird pricing ends on Friday the 13th, and it goes up a little. Other than that, I am really excited for this course. It'll help you understand the tools and framework of shadow work and how to use it in your sexual life. It's the process that worked for me. It's the process that works for my clients. There will be some exercises. Another visualization is part of the course. I'm really excited about it, and I hope to see you there. Thank you guys for being here and also being here for my vulnerability and for my share. I appreciate it. And until next time.